morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. By the way, as I see our YouTube comment section, Cody Tony Wilson saying, listening to DawgNation Daily on my way to Daytona Beach. We love folks doing that. We love our friends at Daytona Beach, and I certainly hope that you're getting ready for a great vacation. What a great time to be getting away. A little bit of a getaway for us, too. Obviously, next week we're going to spend some time with our families here in anticipation of the 4th of July and then the big run through the 2025 season after that. But have no fear. While we are going to be gone, at least in spirit, next week, although we'll have content for you each and every day, minus Friday, we are going to finish strong here with a live show today. A lot of this centers around UGA recruiting, the big get that Georgia got yesterday, what Georgia has a chance to do today, what it could do on Saturday. Jeff Sentell also on the scene down in South Florida for the big event where like Jared Curtis and others are. So all of that on display here. And once again, there is chatter about the kind of home field advantage Georgia brings to the table and what it has to face on the road this year. That's been a kind of a hot topic as we kind of do here during this particular time of the offseason. So we'll give you new stuff on that today, kind of just for fun. Also, a special guest, our friend Kaylee Manziel, going to pop on for a couple of minutes before we're done today too, because Kaylee has seen up close and personal all these big recruiting wins that Georgia's been getting over the last few days. So we're going to cover it all. We're glad you are with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Looking forward to a great vacation next week, spending some time with my family and excited about that. But before we do any of that, of course, it is our tradition around here. We do not mail it in, hopefully any day. We definitely do not mail it in, though, on kind of the day before a getaway. You've perhaps heard us talking about this a little bit. So what it's going to look like next week is this. On Monday and Tuesday, we've got fully pre-recorded shows. We've worked very hard to make those fun and entertaining for you, and hopefully you'll enjoy that. Special appearance by John Stinchcomb, kind enough to join us for one of these. Connor Riley will kind of get into some of the stuff as it relates to Georgia for the upcoming season. That's Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday, you'll get a small portion of me, but also a live edition of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger that it's recorded during the normal sort of DawgNation Daily spot. So there's going to be all kinds of recruiting information kind of unfolding over the weekend. Obviously, for our shows next week, I won't be talking about that. But on Wednesday, whatever we miss from a recruiting standpoint, including the possibility, like I said, James Johnson may commit tomorrow, Jeff and Kaylee kind of in this space, we'll give that to you coming up on Wednesday. And then, once again, a little bit of me on Thursday. Special edition then of DawgNation at Large with both Kaylee Manziel and Connor Riley, a taste of their fun show that usually airs on Thursday evening. We'll give it to you during the DawgNation Daily spot on Thursday. We will all take off in honor of America's birthday, Independence Day, July 4th on that Friday, and then come back on Monday, and we will roll all the way through the 2025 season, and that is going to be a lot of fun. Now, it was also a lot of fun yesterday with Craig Dandridge at Cambridge High School. We will celebrate Georgia's latest recruiting win here in just a little bit. But prior to that, though, let me begin this way. It has been interesting this week. And this is just sort of an off-season thing to do, and we enjoy being a part of this too. It has been interesting this week, the various home field advantages around college football. That has been a hot topic. You may remember the other day, the EA Sports college football video game, which kind of codes some of these rankings into its gameplay to make the game as realistic as it can possibly be. And so they'll reveal some of this as a way of just sort of building hype for the new game. LSU came in as the biggest home field advantage for college football, at least according to the folks from EA Sports. And Georgia on that list came in at number 4. And we kind of talked about that at the time. Well, the Georgia home field advantage at Sanford Stadium is kind of back in the spotlight again today, and I'm going to kind of walk through it this way. I'm going to show you here in a moment an interesting piece from Brad Crawford, CBS Sports, and I kind of like this as a premise for a conversation. I think all of this is fair game. What Brad did at CBS Sports is look at, for the various SEC teams, the so-called best case and worst case scenarios for those teams in this upcoming year. And the best case scenario for Georgia, you'll probably agree with. The worst case scenario for Georgia, you might not agree with. That's just sometimes sort of the way that it goes. But it's the actual description in the text that I thought was kind of interesting. Let me show you this from Brad Crawford, CBSSports.com, and let me tell you why I kind of like this and the idea of this for Georgia. Not surprisingly, Brad Crawford at CBS Sports says that the possible best case scenario here for Georgia is 12-0. No big surprise there. And he writes, why not Georgia? He says, few have picked last year's SEC champions to repeat in Atlanta, and Kirby Smart has likely played that narrative to an infinite degree inside the locker room. We know that's the case, both in terms of right now there's just less steam around Georgia than certainly a team like Texas in the SEC. And as Crawford writes at CBSSports.com, this is a very comfortable place for Georgia to be, and we don't make apologies for that. That Georgia does seem to feed off that doubt. It's also one of those things, too. It's like when it comes to sometimes consensus opinion as shaped by media, just wrong more often than right. So it's also kind of a comfortable place to be because, there are very, rarely instances in which the media sort of sees the next big thing coming in college football. The batting average, the winning streak on that, certainly not very impressive. Either way, though, Crawford goes on to write, and once again, I think everybody will agree with this. This is, he says at CBSSports.com, the Bulldogs' most exciting home schedule in years, with playoff-worthy bouts against Alabama and Texas, and expecting, I love this phrase, rude welcoming of Ole Miss to Sanford Stadium. He says, if Georgia conquers that trio, the Bulldogs are back in the playoff. Now, if you want to kind of sort of nitpick here a little bit, I would suggest you don't necessarily have to win all three of those games to be on track for the playoff. You do have some margin for error in college football right now, but clearly winning as many of these as you can would be a very important thing for Georgia. And this is the thing that we do take comfort in. We made a big deal about this the other day, is that as Crawford writes, hey, maybe rude welcoming of Ole Miss, and we would suggest if you think that's going to be bad for Ole Miss, how bad is it going to be for Alabama in September and what Texas might get in November? And, what's funny about this is this isn't just empty language. I mean, a lot of you were lucky enough to be there. I was, and I remember it well. In 2023, the last time that Ole Miss came to Sanford Stadium, it was an incredible night. Georgia, my memory of that season is it's like the one time that year Ladd McConkey was healthy, Brock Bowers was healthy, Georgia was just firing on all cylinders, and a really pretty good Ole Miss team. That's sort of a fringe playoff contender as it was, a pretty good Ole Miss team. Georgia just dragged them up and down the field. It was as dominant a performance as you're ever going to see from anybody, about as dominant as you're ever going to see from Georgia. And it was certainly in that night game atmosphere, fun environment, a very rude welcoming for Ole Miss that night. Brad Crawford, CBSSports.com, says he believes it'll be that way, or at least has the potential of being that way again if the best case scenario does play out. And we told you earlier this week, you need that for the Alabama game. You needed that for the Texas game. You'll remember, if you're a regular listener or viewer to our program, we even kind of joked about it, that we like it when Kirby Smart is calling out the players. If you ever get a chance to go to practice or you walk by campus while practice is going on, you'll hear Kirby on that mic just kind of reverberating through the rolling hills of Athens for a player that's not hustling or makes a bad decision or whatever else. Kirby not afraid to call anybody out. Sometimes even during practice might call out his own coaches, right? I mean, Kirby's not afraid to do any of that in a practice environment, and certainly holds everybody to an incredibly high standard. And last year, he was also kind of willing to do that when it comes to Georgia fans, too. Remember the Auburn game and what Smart did not think was the intense atmosphere? We played that clip for you a little earlier this week of if you're not at your best, the same way you would expect that from his assistant coaches and his players, he may call you out for that, too. But the best case scenario here this year is that you will be at your best. Those of you who were lucky enough to have what are going to be very expensive tickets to these games, you can't let the wine and cheese crowd dominate this and just sort of sit there on their hands because they're the only ones that can afford the tickets. You got to get the real fans, the rabid fans in the stadium too, and provide this rude welcoming that the CBS writer says is going to take place. And as you've now heard us say many, many times, if you can use your home field advantage as a weapon, if you can use your home field advantage as a weapon, and if you could find a way to, and it's not impossible to say this could happen, it's just really difficult, but if you could find a way to streak that trio of games, to sweep that trio of games, I should say, to beat Texas, to beat Bama, to beat Ole Miss, then as the CBS writer suggests, certainly that doesn't guarantee a spot in the college football playoff, but your chances of being in the playoff would go way up. Georgia has not lost a home game since 2019. Georgia has only lost one home game since 2016. From the 2017 season to present day, Georgia has lost just one skinny little home game in that entire period of time. So home field advantage has been huge for Georgia, and it really needs to be again this year. If you can use that well, it becomes a massive weapon that just greatly increases Georgia's chances of making the college football playoff, which also, as I said before, kind of sort of dovetails us back into the conversation we've been having about how good the Georgia home field advantage is really. Even though the record suggests Georgia's unbeatable at home, Georgia really doesn't get usually the nod, whether it's EA Sports or the media types, as the best home field advantage in college football. Now, here's the one thing I sort of take comfort in. Like, if you know anybody who does, like, say, real estate investing or some sort of investing thing like that gets sort of written up in the media, oftentimes if you have friends, I have friends that do this sort of thing, and they'll tell you all the time that whatever media trend you're reading, or seeing on TV or something like that related to real estate investing or stocks or things like that, perhaps crypto in these days, that whatever you're seeing in the mainstream media, there's going to be a little bit of lag time between the prevalence of that trend, the media noticing it. And sometimes by the time you see some sort of investment-related trend, mainstream media, well, actually the facts on the ground have sort of reversed course because there's just going to be sort of a lag time between people on the ground, involved in, whether it's real estate, stocks, crypto, whatever else, and what has been prevalent enough to be noticed by the mainstream media. Now, the reason why I tell you that is because maybe college football sort of works the same way. That based on records, well, Georgia must have the best home field advantage because it never loses at home. Doesn't that just seem inarguably true? And yet, a little bit of lag time between facts on the ground and what actually gets noticed by some of the mainstream folks, whether it be EA Sports. Our good friend Josh Pate also ranked his top home field advantages. It's got some attention on the media, on social media last 24 hours or so. And like Neyland Stadium in Tennessee got the top nod there from Pate in terms of the biggest home field advantage, which just got Georgia fans beside themselves. And we say this all the time. All of this is just in fun. We pass our time between the sort of barren wasteland of college football in the summer, which actually is not quite so barren anymore because of all the recruiting news. But there are periods of time during the summer where the season still feels like a long way away from here. Those of us who love college football, our season is the shortest, our off season the longest. Most of our life is spent waiting on college football. So how do we wait for it? How do we pass the time? We just pick something to argue about, and everybody gets on one side or the other, and we just sort of shout at each other online. And before you know it, days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and now the season's here, and then we'll just sort of start arguing about the games. But this is how we sort of do this, kind of, getting ready for the season. We sort of find something to argue about. So when Pate put out, Tennessee is the top home field advantage, Georgia fans are just all over that because Georgia obviously blew them out in 2023, blew them out in 2021, blew them out in 2019. That whatever Tennessee is from a home field advantage standpoint, Georgia fans themselves have not had the opportunity to experience the best of Tennessee because Georgia has the tendency to dribble Tennessee like a basketball when it goes into Neyland Stadium. So much so, and I'll show you this on the screen, that as people were kind of reacting to this yesterday, a guy named Roger Bilson was like pulling out like way old tweets of mine. This is from November 13th, 2021. Of course, me being the troll that I am, taking a picture of Tennessee's Neyland Stadium as it's emptying out. What I said back then was on X, which was known as Twitter at the time, I got to tell you, watching UGA empty out Neyland Stadium with a blowout win is a sight that never gets old. Hunter went back and found that tweet to show it to some Tennessee fan who was bragging about how good Neyland Stadium is. So that's kind of where we are right now, arguing about who has the best home field advantage. Some say in Neyland Stadium. Georgia fans don't agree with that, bringing back old tweets of mine as a way of refuting all of that. But either way, it does set the stage for what's going to be an awesome season here this year. And the overall point of the CBS guy does not change, that if Georgia can provide, as he calls it, a rude welcoming to the likes of Ole Miss and Alabama and Texas, boy, Georgia's chances of being back in the college football playoff and avoiding the so-called house of horrors that apparently Neyland Stadium is supposed to be, all of that made so much better. Now, let me do two other quick things just for a moment before we kind of get ready to wrap this up. First of all, speaking of Tennessee, this is a housekeeping note. So as I just told you off the top of the show, today is my last live show for a week. We're going to return again the Monday after the 4th of July. And when I do come back, I believe, now this is one of those things where I can't quite get the feel of exactly how this is going yet, but I do believe that when we come back, we are going to be set to make a huge announcement as it relates to Georgia's trip to Neyland Stadium and what our guy Josh Pate's calling the toughest home field advantage in all of college football. Well, guess what? Been there, done that as far as dominance in Neyland Stadium. And I do believe that by the time I return, I will be able to unveil a huge announcement about that trip to Knoxville. And to sort of say this a different way, one of the biggest and most successful things that DawgNation has ever done is returning again for 2025. And it involves the Georgia-Tennessee game. You perhaps know what I'm talking about. Stay very, very close to this space and watch this space closely when I return from vacation, because I do believe we have a massive announcement ready to make at that time about how all this is going to go down, and you're not going to want to miss that. Now, let me do one more thing before we shift gears and all this. So we have fun with Georgia's home field advantage, what it is, what Georgia faces on the road. A lot of this stemming from Brad Crawford, CBS Sports, discussing the best case scenario for Georgia. He says it's 12-0. Now, if you really want to nitpick, is the best case for Georgia really undefeated against this schedule? That seems like a lot. Georgia's got a huge talent level. It'll be one of the favorites to contend for a national title. Perhaps 12-0 is possible. That seems like a lot, even in a best case scenario type situation. But just for a minute, let's also kind of shift gears to a slightly different conversation and look at what Crawford describes as the worst case scenario for Georgia. I want to make a small point about this, and then we're going to mostly talk about UGA recruiting for the rest of the show. Let me show you this on the screen here for a moment. Brad Crawford on the worst case scenario for Georgia. He says worst case is 8-4. So he's got a wide chasm here between undefeated and 8-4 as the best and worst case scenario for Georgia. But it's what he writes that, once again, I think is at least worth a quick mention of here. Saying at CBS Sports, the only time Georgia's lost 3 or more games during the regular season under Smart came during his debut season. It'd taken all systems failure from Gunnar Stockton, Mike Bobo, and this offense for history to repeat itself. But the Bulldogs do play 5 ranked teams and travel to formidable Auburn and Georgia Tech as well. So that's Brad Crawford suggesting why, if Georgia's not careful, it could be a shaky season. And there's at least some consideration that must be paid to that. But the small point I wanted to make on what Crawford suggests as the worst-case scenario is this. Here's why I'm actually pretty confident about Georgia this year. The phrase he uses is all systems failure. You'd have to have a total breakdown of Gunnar Stockton and the Georgia offense for somehow Georgia to have the sort of multiple losses, the likes of which we haven't seen since Kirby Smart's first year. And this is why I am relatively confident about Georgia. No grand proclamations, no national championship predictions as of yet, but just relatively confident and perhaps more confident, even a little ahead of the market, so to speak, for me on Georgia, because I think we have seen enough from Gunnar Stockton. And this is, I think, the larger point we've been making about Stockton for quite some time, maybe perhaps distilled into a single sentence. I think we have seen enough from Stockton to know what the floor is. I don't think we know what the ceiling is yet. There's a chance that Gunnar Stockton may play better than anybody's wildest imagination. Like, he may go out and be, without the fanfare to begin the year, one of the best quarterbacks in the country by the end of the year. I don't think he needs to be. I don't think that's what Georgia's hopes rest on this season, but who knows how high the ceiling is. However, because we saw 6 quarters of Stockton against playoff competition, Texas in the SEC championship, Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl, 6 quarters against college football playoff competition, I think we have a relatively reasonable assessment that we can make of what the floor is for Stockton in this Georgia offense. In other words, to say it a different way, I think Stockton meets the requirement for what a Georgia starting quarterback needs to be. He's not below the standard. If he was, he would have fallen on his face in those games. His first start came in the college football playoff. He was jerked into duty in an SEC championship against a very good Texas team, which, by the way, had the lead in the game when he entered it. If he was below the standard of a Georgia quarterback, those 6 quarters would have provided the opportunity for him to demonstrate that, and he didn't. We don't know how big and how high the ceiling is for Stockton. We don't know what his potential for ascension is. But we do think, based on what we've already seen, he's likely to avoid disaster. And if he can avoid disaster, that means Georgia is sort of set up to sort of feel like what Georgia's felt like before. Very good at home, like the record suggests, with a chance to go into big, bad Neyland Stadium and find a way to win that game too. In other words, we're getting close to the 2025 season. And I am getting very excited about what we're likely to see. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Glad you're with us. Live today, next week, a little different story, but live today across all platforms. Now, most of you, even when I say live, you don't watch the show live, but you do like it when it's recorded the same day. And so that's kind of what this is here from our normal spot at 10 a.m. Of course, many of you are watching live here right now, and we certainly appreciate that. So many of you, by the way, have been watching our Kroger commitment specials too the last few days. That's been really fun, and so we'll talk more about some of that here coming up in a moment. But prior to that, huge thanks to our friends at Kroger who make it all possible. And we've been hearing from people getting on the road this week, traveling, go on vacation. And to me, one of the really fun things you do when you get ready to go on vacation is that big grocery shopping thing, to sort of be ready for that, whether you're taking food to cook or you just want like drinks to go in the cooler. You got kids, there's a lot of snacks that go in the car with you. I just love the big grocery store trip prior to the vacation. That's just sort of one of those things that, I don't know, sort of feels like summer to me. Well, as you're doing all of that, our friends at Kroger have an awesome opportunity for you. And I think many of you are taking advantage of this based on those, like, and what's cool is when the Kroger Boost truck visits your house, you know it's refrigerated. So, like, the stuff that you're buying stays nice and cool, which, honestly, in this Georgia heat is probably pretty imperative. But it's really cool. You can get free grocery delivery or free grocery pickup. They'll show up. They'll bring your groceries right to you. So if you don't have time to get to the grocery store for your big pre-vacation shopping spree, they'll just bring it all right there to you, and you got more time to enjoy the things you love here this summer. Or if you're getting ready for one of these long trips, and I know there's a lot of concern about what fuel prices are going to be for reasons we don't get into, but if you are thinking about all of that, well, how about earning twice the fuel points on the things you're already buying at your local Kroger? For every dollar you spend, normally it's sort of dollar for dollar savings with a fuel point. But as a Kroger Boost member, it's twice the fuel points on all of that. So please find them online, Kroger.com/boost. Kroger.com/boost for a lot more on that today. So thankful to have Kroger as a part of DawgNation Daily. We're also really thankful to have Jeff Sentell as a part of DawgNation Daily here too. Jeff going to join us in a minute via phone, I understand. He is down in Fort Lauderdale for the big event down there. All the major recruits on hand for that. Jeff watching this very closely. It actually gets going here in just a few minutes. So Jeff kind enough to sort of look ahead to what's next for Georgia recruiting after what has been a really, really awe-inspiring winning streak for these Dogs on the 2026 recruiting trail. Jeff Sentell going to give us all of that here coming up in just a moment. To set the stage for that, though, how about we get ready to go around the DawgHouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. And I tell you, I just had another great time yesterday watching the 4-star wide receiver Craig Dandridge make his pledge to the University of Georgia. And it was another one of these experiences, and thankfully around here we have a lot of these where Dandridge, I think, he really, really made a lot of fans of himself with the level of maturity and just the just really grateful. I mean, just incredibly grateful for this experience. I love the happiness that he put on display. We've kind of seen like a range of emotions here this week where when Jay Lamar, and this was one of the more touching things we've been a part of other day, and we played this clip for you yesterday, in his commitment to Georgia from down in his home in Moultrie, there was such heavy weight on this, and he had, I think, a full realization of the significance of the moment. And in its own way, that was such a beautiful thing to be able to share with our audience. And yesterday, the range of emotion was also kind of captured with Dandridge and his family and all that were on hand with him. And it was just like the happiest bunch of people you'll ever see. Huge smiles with everybody, a lot of laughter, a lot of pats on the back. It was also Dandridge's birthday yesterday, which kind of made it even more fun. And to be able to be a fly on the wall for that special moment for Dandridge and his family and all of his friends and supporters there at Cambridge High School, it's one of those things, I don't care how many times we get a chance to do it, I never get tired of it. And in fact, here, as a part of Around the DawgHouse presented by Zagoria Law, can we go back in time and just sort of relive some of the top moments as another four-star prospect, this time Craig Dandridge, the wide receiver from Cambridge, as he made his commitment to the world known yesterday to these Georgia Bulldogs. This is from yesterday here on the DawgNation video channels.
I mean, this is the best one. This is the best birthday I've ever had. I'll be continuing my academic and athletic career at University of Georgia.
And the Dogs get themselves another one. A beautiful speech by Craig Dandridge thanking his family, and you never get tired of seeing this image.
Man, Coach Bobo, believe it or not, Coach Bobo was jumping up and down a little bit. I know he was pushing me around, but yeah, we had a great time when I told him.
The Georgia Bulldogs have gotten themselves a four-star wide receiver in the person of Craig Dandridge, and there are smiles all around.
What are you most looking forward to over the next 3 or 4 years?
Being a better football player and a better man, being able to go into an environment that I'm not really used to, being able to get out of my comfort zone, be pushed, hopefully win a national championship.
One of the things I love about these ceremonies, we have a chance to provide, share them with our audience, is I think it really shows what oftentimes doesn't get enough, I think, attention and probably doesn't get noticed the way that it should, which is that the recruiting process can be a really wholesome thing. And listen, I'm not naive. I know that there's plenty of stuff out there over the course of time where the recruiting process doesn't quite always feel super wholesome. But honestly, those sorts of things get so much attention, I do think it obscures the significance of a Jay Lamar from Wednesday or the elation of a Craig Dandridge on Thursday and how special this is for the players who've dreamed about this and the families who've helped prepare them for it. Y'all, these ceremonies for me just have such great value because I do think it shows the wholesome part of this, which is the backbone of the whole thing. I mean, college football is a very family-oriented deal. Programs always try to sell themselves as families. Programs have to sell themselves to the families of the players. And as we say all the time, if mama's not happy, nobody's going to be happy when it comes to a lot of this kind of stuff. There is an undeniable sort of narrative thread of the importance of family all throughout college football, which, by the way, makes it different than a lot of other sports, especially professional sports where you're dealing with true grown men. College football just has this. It's one of the reasons why we enjoy celebrating college football. And by the way, it's also one of the reasons why we want to protect college football in the form that it's been in, because we think family is really important too. And we love the way in which college football kind of finds its own ways to celebrate that. Obviously, with Dandridge yesterday, another great example of that, because clearly his family has done something right with raising him based on the maturity and just the awesome spirit he put on display as he chose the University of Georgia. Now, let me give you two other quick notes here real quick, and we'll bring on Jeff Sentell. So what was yesterday? 5th straight day with a commitment. Georgia trying to make it 6 for 6 here today with the possibility of even another coming on Saturday. So let me kind of give you a lead-in for this, then I'll ask Jeff Sentell about it. This afternoon, or sometime today, I'm actually not even sure when, Chase Calicut, the defensive back from North Shore High School in Houston, which, by the way, has not been in our lives on this show, I don't think, since the days of Zach Evans, unless I'm forgetting somebody. Calicut gets ready to make his decision today. Our good friend Chad Simmons says it's Georgia, Michigan, Texas, as the hat's on the table for Calicut. We'll see if that's the case. He's actually going to do this from Fort Lauderdale, the site of the OT7 finals. So Calicut gets ready to go today. I would say that Georgia's got a chance on this. Jeff Sentell can tell us how good of a chance. It seems like, though, that chance might be slipping away when it comes to the offensive lineman Malachi Lee from Hawaii, who has taken a couple of visits and brought family in tow, things like that. Seems like Georgia had its real shot with Lee. But one way or another, Steve Wiltfong with this prediction the last couple of days, Malachi Lee now to go to Michigan. So we're watching the Malachi Lee news today, but all of the online projections would have you believe that Lee is going to Michigan, not Georgia. This after Georgia just won the other day with Ekene Ogboko, 4-star offensive lineman there from North Carolina. Now, Saturday it's James Johnson. We talked about Johnson yesterday. Online predictions do favor Georgia in this right now. We'll find out how true that is. But there's a lot going on with recruiting. Georgia trying to get its 6th straight day of a commitment here today. Will they do it? Jeff Sentell will tell us. Before that, though, let's wrap up around the DawgHouse, presented by our friends at Zagoria Law. Now, the Dogs have been taking a big bite out of this 2026 class over the course of the last week. But when it comes to another kind of dog bite, that's a lot less pleasant thing to consider. You see stories in the news about this all the time. Dogs get free. They're not properly cared for by their owners. There is negligence involved, like any other situation where people kind of seek compensation from a personal injury standpoint. Our friends at Zagoria Law have specialized, though, in this area of personal injury law. For those bitten or injured by a dog that wasn't properly cared for, negligence on the part of the owner. And our friends from Zagoria Law have literally written the book on how to win these types of cases. They're the only law firm in Georgia that specializes in personal injury for those injured or bitten by a dog. Someone you love has that story. Well, it's worth it to reach out to our friends at Zagoria Law, tell them what happened, and let them advise you on kind of appropriate next steps. Because if you're talking about medical bills, if you're talking about pain and suffering, well, wouldn't you want to fight for the compensation you feel like you deserve? We think you deserve a chance at that. Our friends at Zagoria Law want to help you. They've been doing that for dog fans in our audience for a long, long time now. So give them a call, 833-GA-DOG-BITE, dog spelled conventionally, D-O-G, 833-GA-DOG-BITE, or online, ZagoriaLaw.com, ZAGORIA, ZagoriaLaw.com, for a lot more on that today. Great to have Zagoria Law as a part of Around the DawgHouse. All right, speaking of Craig Dandridge yesterday, the person running point for us on that at Cambridge was Kaylee Manziel. Before we're done, Kaylee going to make a special appearance here on DawgNation Daily as part of our Long Drink, Long Finish, just to kind of recap what she saw kind of behind the scenes from these big recruiting announcements. We'll get to all of that. But the question on your mind for the moment is, what comes next after all of this? And can Georgia make it a 6th straight day with a commitment here today? Let's find that out from our guy, Jeff Sentell, on the scene in Fort Lauderdale, joining us here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So Jeff Sentell is in Fort Lauderdale, a lot of beautiful coastal area down there. As I'm looking here on YouTube, I also see Brad H. says he's on a boat right now. So a lot of people living very enjoyable lives here at the moment while I sit in this box of a studio and talk to all of you. So I'll live vicariously through everybody else. Of course, it sounds like Jeff's on a boat here too. But Jeff, glad to have you here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And I think the question on the mind of everybody right now, after 5 straight days of commitments, can Georgia make it at least one with a 6th straight commitment today? Let me start with the simplest answer here, and then we'll work to something slightly more complicated. Is it safe to say, to keep the nautical theme alive here, the ship has sailed on Malachi Lee? Is it Michigan for the young man from Hawaii later on today?
Good morning, Brandon. Actually, I would say that's an appropriate maritime descriptor right there. Brandon, it is kind of just the thing where Michigan has kind of missed or hadn't really splurged on a lot of players in this cycle. Of course, they went crazy last year at the quarterback position. I think it's really, Brandon, what should happen, because Michigan's been loving on Malachi Lee years. You know, it's one of those recruitments. I don't know if they have Tyler Atkinson level investment like the Dogs do with that 5-star home state linebacker, but I think Lee right now the safe pick, the right pick. It would be a surprise pick if he chose the Dogs today.
How would you compare Lee to Ekene Ogboko, the four-star offensive lineman that Georgia recently did win with? Any comparison you can make between the two? And obviously Georgia fans are hoping they got the better of that pair.
Yeah, I would say, Brandon, the way you got to look at that is I think Ekene is right at 300 pounds, 6'6" plus, got that crazy 84.6-inch reach. A lot of prototype tools there. I think Lee's a guy that they'd have to slim down a little bit. He'd have to drop. One thing you like about the Ogboko profile is he plays North Carolina high school football. We know that's backyard at times for Travion Scott when he's trying to go get players. We also know that there's a young man that's going to Notre Dame that's an edge rusher on the same high school football team that Ogboko drills against every day. Those make you feel a little bit more comfortable compared to a really toolsy prototype guy in Lee. And the reason why I'm saying that is he's in Hawaii, not seeing that big-time competition every day. And in contrast to Ogboko is probably going to need to put on about 10 or 15 pounds, 20 pounds to be ready to play in the SEC. With Lee, it looks like, obviously raw, not the highest levels of football. Skill set is there, but he's going to have to drop some weight, man, to get him. He's probably 340, 345 right now. He'll have to drop some weight to, get into that style, to fit that red and black uniform the way Ogboko would.
So moving on to maybe a more likely recruiting win, but also a significant challenge here too. Like, how much of a factor is Georgia for Chase Calicut today? Obviously, it's one of the the finalists, I reckon, but. I won't pretend to know as much about this recruitment as maybe some of the others we've talked about. What are Georgia's chances with the defensive back from Houston, Chase Calicut, at some point in time dropping here on this Friday?
So, Brandon, I've been working on the line as I'm traveling this morning. Let me know if you approve. Brandon, I think the good Lord rested after 7 days, or on the seventh day, the good Lord rested. I don't know if Kirby Smart and Georgia are going to rest with this recruiting streak for any foreseeable future. I think Georgia's really serious right now with Calicut. I think it's down to just it feels to me like it's down to just Georgia and Texas. Brandon, he will make his decision at approximately 4:15 p.m. this afternoon from the OT7. Things get started up there today. Jared Curtis, of all people, everybody knows that name and loves that name in the class, spoke to him last night. His first game of 3 today will be at 2:30 p.m. at the OT7 complex in Fort Lauderdale. So, interesting times, Brandon. Got to talk to Chase Calicut last night. Got to talk to Jared Curtis. Got to talk to Derek Cooper last night. Traveling right now on the way to the Future 50 in Sarasota for their media day today.
Really fascinating stuff. So for those who maybe are only now just sort of acquainting themselves with Calicut, what can you tell us about him other than, as I joked earlier, he goes to the same high school that Zach Evans, the former running back, once went to. What can you tell us about Calicut for maybe those who haven't been as acquainted with him?
Big, Brandon. Big. And you spelled Chase with a C. That's one thing I want to make sure people kind of get dialed in there. But Calicut's about 6'3" and about 195, Brandon. That's kind of SEC ready. He's got safety size. And really, Brandon, Georgia really got into this thing when he took the official visit earlier this month. And Georgia really just jumped on his radar big time. There's a lot that he likes right now about development at Georgia, the ability to play early, and the message he's heard from Dante Williams.
Fun to consider that. Then on Saturday, as we've been talking about the show the last couple of days, what might go down with James Johnson, defensive lineman, one of the best in the country at his position, Northwestern High School down there in that South Florida, Miami area. There has been a lot of movement, as it would appear, with Georgia the last couple of days. Georgia fans are a little on guard about this because we've sort of seen this kind of narrative before of the commitment dates announced, there's a trend for Georgia, and then there's a quick sort of reversal about face at the very last moment. How real do you think this new sudden surge for Georgia and Johnson, which would be, if Calicut drops today, a 7th straight day of commitments, and arguably one of the biggest of them all if Johnson does land the Georgia class on Saturday. What do you make about the fact that Georgia's seemingly always been a factor, but now, according to some, maybe the factor before that commitment announcement there on Saturday?
Brandon, to me, it feels a lot like Jay Lamar from earlier this week, I guess when we were in South Georgia, because J.J. Johnson named Georgia his leader back in January, and then all the recruiting, I guess the cogs of every school's recruiting machine started working. You heard about J.J. Johnson in Miami. You heard about him moving to a Miami-friendly school there at Northwestern. He actually moved to Miami, Northwestern, from the Fort Myers area. And then you heard Texas with James Johnson as well, calls himself JJ, Brandon. And this would be one of those elite defensive linemen. I'd probably spell that with a capital E as well, that Georgia seemingly is going to try to hoard and load up on, especially the interior guys in this 2026 class. And if he comes full circle around, Brandon, it's another thing that reminds me of Jay Lamar, how right out of the box sounded like Dawgs heavy, and then all these other flirtations happen, and now at the finish line, he's kind of going with what his gut reaction would be on his commitment day.
And then it seems like Georgia's focus on the defensive line is kind of coming into the picture here a little bit because of what you've got. P.J. Dean, the half brother of Jared Wilson, who's also set to make an announcement next week. I know that is it Valdon Sone? Is that how you say his last name? Is it Sone? Valdon Sone, I guess, is out there a bit too, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly. Kind of give me, including J.J. Johnson here, kind of give me that snapshot of Georgia with the defensive line, because it sort of feels like we're kind of seeing some of that kind of come into picture here a bit.
Happening really fast. I agree with you there, man. So I think Georgia, if they could have any of them, I think the top choice would be Valdon Sone.
Sone, is that how you say it? Is it Sone? Is it Sone?
Yeah. It's a very intriguing thing, Brandon, because again, PPI International, that's the organization that finds talented Europeans. They could be soccer players. They could be, the whole gamut of different athletic types, but they want to give American football a try. And he's from Sweden. He actually goes to high school in Virginia, but he's not going to come back home from Sweden for another month. Very interesting there. You think about the best player on a high school team not even practicing at his high school until he comes back from overseas. He's got a decision to make, Brandon, where he's got to decide, does he want to commit in July? So it would be Georgia, Auburn, Nebraska. That Georgia wants.
We may be losing Jeff Sentell here.
The defensive side to come. So for me, there's Valdon, and you've also got J.J. Johnson. But with Sone, he wants to make his decision in line. Those are the out. But there is a little pushback. That pushback is from Texas. That pushback is from Ohio State. They want him to wait until September when he can get on their campuses and give those schools an official visit for his decision.
So obviously we'll be watching that very closely. And then to kind of fast forward here a little bit, so we're going to ride this recruiting streak for Georgia as long as it goes, and you start thinking about July 12th as well, where other Georgia targets, maybe most notably Caden Prothro, but obviously Derek Cooper's involved in this too. Kind of give me the picture here, because this will be the last time you and I get to speak for a while, because I'm going to be gone next week. So kind of give me the picture of post this weekend, moving into next weekend, moving into next week, then into July, where those announcements are set to take place July 12th. Just kind of give me kind of an overall snapshot of what the next week is going to look like. Obviously, folks will be watching this closely, even if I'm not here doing the show on a daily basis.
Well, Brandon, there's some things you try to be well informed on. I will say this. If this streak lasts through your vacation, I would be surprised, man. There's probably not enough targets left on the top targets board for Georgia to get 12, 13, 14 days in a row. I spoke to Derek Cooper last night. Cooper told me, very interestingly, that he speaks to Jay Lamar about every day. They talk about their careers. They talk about their lives. They talk about their personal lives. So not only is there the Kirby Smart, the Josh Crawford connection, there's a strong connection with a potential teammate as well to think about. Derek Cooper told me, now this is very interesting, he said no matter what he decides on July the 12th, his recruitment will not be done. He will still take visits. He will still look and see other schools. And he also said, Brandon, very curiously, that it's a different school about every day for him. He's in that flip-flop phase where he's back and forth, loves his school one day, loves his school the next. So Derek Cooper will be very interesting to watch. The other big storyline for me, and there's not been a timeline established, but it's going to be Tyler Atkinson. Is he going to set a date? When is he going to make his decision? Because we've been told he wants to have his decision squared off before his senior year starts high school football with Grayson High School in Metro Atlanta.
Jeff, outstanding stuff. I guess to sort of wrap it up here, tell us what's going to happen down there in Fort Lauderdale where you are. Or I think it's Fort Lauderdale. Tell us what's going to happen and kind of how it's all playing out. Give me the scene there that you're a part of.
So there's a lot. Today, Brandon, we're actually driving right now to Bradenton, Florida, to IMG Academy for the Future 50, where these are the top 50 rising juniors in the country. You're going to see a lot of luminaries there. You're going to see a lot of Georgia targets. Some of these same guys I'm going to be talking to today will be a part of probably a Dog Days of Summer commitment streak this time a year from now in 2026. We know KJ Green out of Stone Mountain is going to be there, Cole Crawford out of Cartersville, Grant Haviland out of Milton. We do that today. Then we cross back across the Everglades to go see OT7 the rest of the week. James Johnson tells me he's going to commit actually at a festival called the West End Festival tomorrow. So we'll be all over that, kind of try to track it down. We're going to watch Jared Curtis play some ball. We're going to see Chase Calicut again. So lots of stuff going on here. I'm told, this is kind of some interesting news. Jared Curtis told me last night, Brandon, that Georgia commit Lincoln Keys is going to make his way down here. He's going to be able to play with him at OT7 this weekend. So we'll keep our eyes open for that potential future Georgia pass-catching combo right there. We get a sneak preview this weekend.
Jeff, great stuff. Be careful, please, and we'll look forward to reading plenty of good stuff from you at DawgNation.com, because even if I'm not here live, still consuming all that content there at DawgNation.com. Can't wait to see what comes out of all of this, and I think I speak for all Georgia fans when I say I can't wait to see what comes next for UGA recruiting. Thanks for talking to us about it here today.
Hey, man, thanks, buddy. Have a good holiday, man. You deserve it.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Appreciate it. Good stuff there.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
It's a little bit of a barnstorming tour for Jeff, right? Fort Lauderdale to Bradenton, then back to Fort Lauderdale again. So kind of hopscotching down there a little bit in South Florida to bring us all of that. But we'll be reading at DawgNation.com, and it's really interesting. I mean, let me just say this real quick because I want to keep the train on the tracks here. I mean, the best that I can tell, this Derek Cooper stuff is real. And as Jeff said, even if he makes the announcement for Georgia on July 12th, who knows if that really sticks. This is a guy that has been reminded, kind of at one point in time sort of committed to Georgia before, and everybody sort of thought, that's a little too soon. Let's not make this premature. So Georgia's always been a factor for Cooper. And when we had Jay Lamar on the other day, Lamar made it very, very clear that the one guy he wanted to see join him at Georgia, and you got to understand the level of selflessness this requires. He said, I want to be Derek Cooper. Apparently Lamar and Cooper are close, and running backs like the idea of teaming up together, tandems. They like that sort of thing. That could be really real. And I think one of the questions I get sometimes is, in fact, I think it was George Armstrong that wrote in this week about this on X, of, hey, BA, do you feel like this class for Georgia has as much kind of top-end elite talent as we're used to seeing in the past? And I am not a mathematics expert. Many of y'all know that. There are a lot I don't know. Math is near the top of that list. So in terms of how you tabulate, say for a long time, like the 24/7 composite is sort of ranked like class total 300 and above was sort of an unofficial designation for an elite class. Is Georgia going to be 300 this year, for instance? Some people have kind of wondered that. Here's what I will say, though, as far as Georgia's pursuit of true elite level talent, however you define it, that they're not quite done yet. What happens if Cooper joins? What happens if Caden Prothrow joins? What happens if Tyler Atkinson joins? What happens if James Johnson, the defensive lineman tomorrow, that's a top 50 player in the country. That by any definition, that ought to be among the true blue chip elite for you. There are still some sort of big names out there. I'm also kind of curious whether it be Dandridge, who we saw yesterday, Lamar, who we saw the day before. Some of these recruiting rankings for some of these guys for Georgia, I think also have a chance to elevate themselves as time goes on too. So if you care about the kind of team ranking, the rating for the class overall when the cycle comes to an end, I think some of that is still yet to be kind of written. So we'll see about that. For now, though, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And when Jeff Sentell joins us from down there in South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, that's Port Everglades. That's a Royal Caribbean cruise port. A lot of great ships have sailed out of Port Everglades in Fort Lauderdale. You're also just right down the road from the Port of Miami. That's Icon of the Seas, folks. That's where it has made its home, and that's for a long time kind of been Royal Caribbean's home. But here's what I love, is that there would have maybe been a time, if you want to think back like 20 years ago or something like that, where if you wanted like the best that Royal Caribbean had to offer, maybe you did have to go out of the Port of Miami to experience it. That was just sort of the capital of cruising down there in Miami. And if you're a regular cruiser, you understand that. If you're new to cruising, or if you've not cruised before, what you may not truly appreciate is that Port Canaveral, which for us is just the most convenient port, it's closer, it's far closer. You can drive there, which I enjoy doing. In fact, I think it's probably easier to drive there, to be honest with you. Like Port Canaveral all of a sudden now doesn't take a back seat at all to what the Port of Miami is all about. In fact, the brand new in the Icon class of ships, Star of the Seas, is going to be sailing out of Port Canaveral. We do our DawgNation cruise every year out of Port Canaveral on Utopia of the Sea. So now you've got the newest Oasis class ship. You're about to have the newest Icon class ship, both sailing out of Port Canaveral. That's pretty big bragging rights for those of us who consider it our home port. And if you want the most convenient Royal Caribbean cruise vacation you can take, that's probably the one, sailing out of Port Canaveral, especially if it's your first time going on a cruise. I think that's a great experience. So let Jessica Slater help you out with all of this. Terrific travel advisor, especially selected for us by Royal Caribbean. She can tell you about all the fun things to do on board Star of the Seas or Utopia of the Seas. She can get you ready for the DawgNation cruise next April. You can do all of that with her. Just give her a call. 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. She will get you ready for that. jslater@dreamvacations.com. All right, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean just for a moment. And today begins what I'm going to do as a series over the course of the next 3 days, today, Monday, and Tuesday, during our cruising around the SEC space, of course, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. We're very close to SEC Media Days. And there'll be lots of questions asked of all the coaches and all the programs here in Atlanta coming up later on in July. And so what I want to do is a little bit of a preview to this. And one day next week, we'll look at specifically this as it relates to Georgia and also all of the other SEC teams at that time. Now, to be frank, I saved all the good ones for next week. So we're going to start at the bottom. And we're going to kind of look at one big question here for the SEC's, at least on paper, kind of worst teams. And then we're going to work our way up to the playoff contenders, the tough teams on Georgia's schedule. We're going to get to them on both Monday and Tuesday. Really fun theme for us cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean next week. But let me kind of focus on the bottom part of this just for a moment. And I think the big question here is if you're a Georgia fan or if you're a fan of an SEC contender that's kind of not in this group here right now, I think the big question you have to ask is, how many of these teams are on your schedule? Because if you've got multiple of these teams, for the most part, at least the bottom four, I think you're probably in pretty good shape. For instance, of the teams with like the least likely chance of winning the SEC or contending for the playoff, think about Vanderbilt, think about Missouri, think about Arkansas, think about Mississippi State, think about Kentucky. Georgia does get the benefit of playing two of these teams. It does play Kentucky, and it does play Mississippi State. Now, obviously, a year ago, the Georgia-Kentucky game was pretty close, and Kentucky did upset Ole Miss. I personally think the bottom is falling out for Kentucky. In other words, college football is a sport that continually surprises us. But in order for a surprise to count as a surprise, some things have to work out exactly as you think they might. And this is one of those non-surprises I expect to occur. Right now, Kentucky looks terrible on paper. I believe this is a terrible football team. I think this is Mark Stoops' last year. I feel the same way about Mississippi State. Mississippi State is the least notable team in the SEC, the most nondescript team in our conference right now. I don't see any way there's a surprise with this. I just think they're bad. And honestly, they got dealt a bad hand a couple of years ago. Mike Leach's untimely death resulted in kind of an interim coach getting a full-time job. That was meant to be a short-term proposition, but sometimes the hire you make after the short-term proposition sort of turns out to be that too. I don't see any evidence at all that Mississippi State's building anything of note. And I don't say that to like revel, because honestly, I don't care enough to make a hot take about this. I don't see any signs of life coming from Mississippi State. To me, on paper, they are as bad as you think they might be. Let me give you three more that are slightly more interesting than those two, though. Let's start with our buddy Sam Pittman at Arkansas. Really like Arkansas a lot. I should say like Pittman a lot. Arkansas has been a surprise team before. Think about 2020 in his first year, certainly 2021 when they kind of made their way into the top 25. I don't quite see that now. Now, the one thing that was cool about Arkansas last year, the quarterback they brought in from Boise State, when he was healthy a year ago, he's pretty good. And this was an example of Arkansas just sort of finding somebody that the rest of the world just didn't know about. I think they got him in a little bit of an NIL bargain, and they just sort of had a player that I don't think other people quite realize. And so, whereas I can fairly quickly dismiss Kentucky, fairly quickly dismiss Mississippi State in terms of just being at the absolute bottom of the league, I at least give a little more deference to Sam Pittman because he has done it at Arkansas before. But honestly, this sort of feels like the end for Pittman. He's had an amazing coaching career. If he's ready to kind of go off into the sunset after this year and go live on the lake and play horses and stuff like that, then by all means, he's earned the right to do that. Does he have any more kind of favorite son magic in Fayetteville one more time? We'll see. There's at least more signs of life coming out of Arkansas than there is at Mississippi State, and there probably is at Kentucky. And of course, I say that as someone who hopes that's true because I do like Pittman. Let me also say this about Vanderbilt, and then I'll mention Missouri. I really liked Diego Pavia a year ago, the Vanderbilt quarterback, but I hated the interview he did the other day, where a little bit like Thomas Castellanos from Florida State was like shooting off his mouth. Pavia was it Bussin' with the Boys? Is that who he's with? I forget now. One of those sort of Barstool style shows. He just was shooting off his mouth and saying this and saying that. And it just felt like way too much hubris for a guy who is still, let's be honest, the Vanderbilt quarterback. So if that's the mindset that he's in, I think that kind of paints a troubling picture here for 2025. Vanderbilt was a surprise team a year ago. I'm talking about legitimately so. They got wins. They got real live wins and played well more often than not. I don't know that I see that replicating itself here this year, especially if Pavia is saying some of the stuff that he's saying right now. And then finally, I'll mention Missouri, who I honestly view as a completely different category than any of the others I just mentioned. I think Eli Drinkwitz's a pretty good coach. And I think that Pribble, the quarterback that comes over from Penn State, is at least a little bit of an interesting add. And I think that Damon Wilson leaving here to go up there is probably a bit of an interesting add too. Certainly we're led to believe that Missouri really wanted him based on what they did to get him. So perhaps they have plans to really use him. In other words, when you start thinking about season win totals, for those of you who care about that, Missouri's projected right there around 7.5. This is one of those projections I could see going over. I could see Drinkwitz finding an 8th or a 9th win. I really could. Quietly, this has been a pretty tough team in the SEC. In fact, even a year ago, in which they started the year with playoff expectations and they didn't quite get there. The truth is, go back and look, they still won 10 games. They did not fall apart. They really didn't. they were still a pretty tough out for virtually the entirety of the season. I'd have my eye on Missouri a little bit, at least as perhaps finding that sort of 8th, or maybe if under the right circumstances, that 9th win, and certainly distancing itself from the bottom of the conference. And we'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And here on DawgNation Daily, as we like to do on Friday, we'll close things out with a long drink, long finish. And we'll get ready to say hello to our good friend Kaylee Mansell. And I wanted to kind of give Kaylee a little love on the show today because she has very quietly been really doing a bunch of heavy lifting this week, running point for Craig Dandridge yesterday, a major part of all of our commitment specials over the course of the last few days. Kaylee, for me, sitting in the studio and kind of anchoring this, it's fun to watch what you're a part of there on the scene. I can only imagine how much more fun it must be for what you're doing there. The chance to experience this, the chance to see these very, very poignant, very, very touching moments. How much fun, let's start with Craig Dandridge from yesterday. How much fun is that to see his family just so beyond excited for their son? And obviously it was his 18th birthday. How much fun was that one to be a part of there yesterday?
I mean, honestly, just really looking back on the last couple of weeks being on the road with Jeff, I feel like I found a whole new passion in this. I've spent so much time around high school football, and you can speak to this too because we do it together, and we get to watch their games, and I get to interview them after, but seeing them take that next step and accomplish the dream that they've been working towards their whole life, like, it brings me a sort of joy that I didn't know that I could find in something like this. I think that Craig Dandridge is a really good example of it as someone who didn't have their first Power 4 offer until November of last year. You didn't realize that you were working towards something like this, and then you looked at all the hats he had on the table. I mean, a variety of good schools, not just good football schools, but schools like Stanford and Oklahoma as well. And to see his family reaction, as well as the reaction of the school, because I talked to the coach after, and he was like, we usually don't have these here at Cambridge. They're usually down the road from us. So you can just tell that it means so much more than just saying, you know, with that being said, I'm going to the University of Georgia. Like, it doesn't just affect a kid like Craig, but also the people around him as well.
Well, I'll also add this. And listen, we know at Georgia there's an element of the recruiting process that has to be a little cold and has to be a little calculated. In other words, when you're a kid, you go to the amusement park, you have to be this tall to ride this ride. Georgia's got a version of that. They do not compromise on their size specs. They don't compromise on their athletic credentials. There is just a sort of God-given thing you have to have, and if you don't have it, then Georgia just can't do it because they've got enough track record to know what it takes to succeed. So they're not going to pay attention to players that don't bring the right specs, the right credentials. However, within the category of players who are big enough and are strong enough and are athletic enough, I think what's fun, Kaylee, and you saw this and you did such a great job of, you know, putting this on camera for all of us to see, the intangible part of this matters too. Incredible intangibles related to Dandridge yesterday, Lamar the day before, Kamari Brooks going back to Monday. The level of intangibles involved in these guys is also something that Georgia still takes really seriously. And I feel like you and I probably know that. I'm glad the rest of the audience gets a chance to see it. It's not just show me what a guy weighs and show me how tall he is and show me how fast he runs. It's, can you also give me some peace of mind about how he's going to fit into our culture? And I think when you see these guys this week, you see how important that aspect of this is for the Georgia folks as well.
I think you make a really good point because my eyes were open to what you just said a couple months ago when at the Sugar Bowl, Jeff actually interviewed all the Georgia assistant coaches on what's the main thing that you look for in a recruit besides the tape. And one of the answers that consistently came up was how well do they fit into the position group and the culture within the program. We covered a variety of guys that play all different positions this week, but the one thing that remained constant, even with it being a running back and a defensive lineman and a wide receiver, is the passion that comes out when they speak about them playing football and also their appreciation and admiration for the Georgia football program. I think back to Jay Lamar's ceremony. My gosh, I mean, I don't think I've ever been to a ceremony that was so emotional that I could feel that for him. And I think it just goes to show that there's so much that happens behind the scenes on the recruiting trail. Yes, the tape plays a big part in it, but these guys are going on multiple visits. I mean, we've even heard of guys taking upwards of like 10 visits. And so there has to be so many conversations behind the scenes. And because Georgia is such a top program, they can be selective about the players that they bring. I know a lot of other schools can't say that. So at the end of the day, they can have their pick of the litter because of who they are, and they're not going to put someone into the program that they don't feel like is going to be a culture fit for them. And I feel like everybody that we've covered the last 2 weeks really fits the mold for what a Georgia player is.
All right, before we wrap up our long drink, long finish, let me also say thank you to you, because in addition to the work you've been doing with recruiting, next week we're going to get a chance to hear a lot from you on Wednesday as a part of Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger in this space, as a part of DawgNation at Large on Thursday. And listen, I try not to be away from work too much. I do, though, kind of before the summer comes to an end, like to spend a little time with my family. And I love knowing that DawgNation remains in good hands, even when I sort of step away for a couple of days. So thank you so much for agreeing to kind of be a part of, for those who either watch live or expect this to sort of show up in their podcast feed, thank you for being a part of this next week. I know people love the chance to hear from you. So I just wanted to say thanks for Wednesday, Thursday next week. I'll still be on the show some, but for people who want to get the latest recruiting information and all the other stuff that happens during what, frankly, has turned out to be a really busy summer for Georgia, thanks for providing that to the DawgNation Daily audience next week.
Well, I hate to sound selfish because obviously I love any time that I get to be in the studio with you, but it's okay if you take a vacation every now and then, because I get to take your primetime spot and say what I want to say and still know that at the end of the week you're going to come back and DawgNation Daily is not going to be canceled because of something that I did. So thanks for trusting in me to be in that role, because I know that it doesn't come easy to you.
Well, Kaylee, good stuff. Hope you have a great weekend, and thanks for being here as a part of our Long Drink, Long Finish.
Thank you.
And by the way, speaking of great weekend, hope you're all getting ready to enjoy one of those. And if you want to make that weekend a special experience, well, the Finnish Long Drink, great way to do that. You got a pool party going on. You got friends coming over to kind of get out of the heat or something like that. Well, cool off and refresh yourself with an ice-cold Finnish long drink. Put that thing down at the bottom of the cooler and let that can get nice and cold. I love when we show the video here. You can see the kind of the condensation sort of dripping down the side. It looks so good. It makes you want to have one right now. And honestly, getting the weekend started doesn't seem like a bad idea. So go online, thelongdrink.com. You can find out where to pick some up today, whether it's the long drink strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. My favorite, the long drink traditional citrus. It's the blue can. The grapefruit flavor, the gin kick, long drink cranberry. My wife loves that. You get the pineapple version, the long drink, the peach flavored version here in the Peach State. So many awesome opportunities on all of that. So make sure you find out more, including putting in your zip code and figuring out where you can pick some up online at thelongdrink.com. So as we get ready to say goodbye, for me, obviously pre-recorded Monday and Tuesday, portion of that Wednesday and Thursday. And as Kaylee said, a good bit of her on both Wednesday and Thursday with Jeff Sentell on Wednesday, then Connor Riley on Thursday. We'll take off for the 4th of July in celebration of our nation's birthday, and then come back and see you on Monday for the entire run through the 2025 season. Let me say thank you. So many of you are so kind to join us each and every day. You've created for us an opportunity to sit here and narrate the experience of being a Georgia football fan. It is an unbelievably awesome privilege, and I always think a lot about that when I get ready to step away from work. I am so grateful for the fact that I have a job that I don't like to be gone from. I miss it. I look forward to being back, and I look forward to talking Georgia football again with you here very soon as well. How about a golden shoe? I saw this online. Our friend Kitsy Ann, who some of y'all know from X. So we're obviously celebrating the 50th anniversary of the original summer blockbuster Jaws. You perhaps know this. When I was a kid, there was a T-shirt that people used to wear called Georgia, where it was like the Georgia Bulldog getting ready to, sort of come up from the water to bite the gator. Well, she's got a little bit of a play on that, and sort of the original Jaws movie poster. How about the dog kind of coming up from the water to bite the gator? It says Dawgs in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Jaws. A nice little tie-in there with Georgia. Very good stuff from Kitsy Ann. I saw that, and I wanted to kind of, just sort of felt like a summer thing to do. So we'll give her a golden shoe for that. Lousy, stinking Gators, that's exactly what they got waiting for them. They may be floating in the water right now, but Georgia's on its way to chomp down once again. About 1,693 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. You'll have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday, and then I'll see you back live again the following Monday. Enjoy the summer, everybody. Glad to have you here as a part of DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. I don't ever want to be accused of being immodest, but I do have to say, in lesser broadcast hands, a getaway day prior to vacation would just be sort of a throwaway. It'd be Mount Rushmore, and you'd just get on and go. I mean, how much recruiting information did you get? Bringing in all kinds of stuff, previewing announcements, making, giving you what I think is a pretty high value over-under play. I mean, that's a lot that's a lot of content for any day. But on a, sort of a senioritis vacation, pre-vacation show, I would say we did our job. I would say we did our job. And I do say that humbly. Now, let's find out what's on your mind. And in the spirit of, whatever, I'm going to go Facebook first because I feel like they owe that. On Facebook, and one of these days I might actually even sign back into Facebook on my, laptop. I don't want to get too crazy, but I might one day do that. All right, here on Facebook, to see how people are doing. And boy, it moves slow. I'll get some YouTube while this is loading. Jonathan Aaron says, if you had to kick two teams out and replace them with two teams in the SEC, who are you picking? The two teams that I would kick out are Texas and Oklahoma. In fact, if college football could kind of go back to just being, if Texas and Oklahoma were still in the Big 12, if the Pac-12 still existed, and if the SEC and the Big Ten existed in their sort of pre-expansion form, I really do think not only is that better for college football overall, I actually think it's better for the SEC. I think that there are laws of unintended consequences, and in retrospect, bringing Texas and Oklahoma into the SEC has set off a chain reaction of events that has lessened the SEC's stranglehold over the rest of college football. It's diminished its position at the top of the sport. I think that's the case. Boy, what a disaster Facebook is right now. Not the comments. My attempt to get on the comments. So we'll keep working with that. But and people will say in response to that, well, if the SEC didn't grab Texas and Oklahoma, they just would have gone to the Big Ten. Perhaps that's the case. Therefore, from a game theory perspective, you know what game theory is? From a game theory perspective, what Greg Sankey perhaps should have done was find a way to keep Texas and Oklahoma in the Big 12 as a way of sort of protecting the advantage the SEC had, because the SEC's advantage has lessened pretty significantly ever since then. Y'all, I'm going to try my best to get on Facebook, but apparently I'm in a cave here. Jerry Dog Fan says, enjoy your vacation. Go Dogs. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Josh Hobb says, who do you think steps up to be this next star linebacker this year? Well, I think that C.J. Allen could win the Buckus Award. And obviously Georgia's had three of them, so you're always kind of wondering who the next is. So I think C.J. Allen could do it. I'm telling you right now, and I don't mean this is in any way disrespectful to C.J. or Braylon Wilson, it's going to be really, really hard to keep Chris Cole and Justin Williams off the field. It just is. In fact, let me make a knee-jerk reaction hot take that I have not in any way thought more than 2 seconds about. But y'all see if I'm not right. Do you think there are two backups in America at any position better than Chris Cole and Justin Williams? And see, I think when people sort of wonder about Georgia, this is one of the things that they obviously don't know. People don't know who Georgia's backup inside linebackers are. I mean, honestly, most of the national media could do well to even tell you one player on the Georgia defense. They just don't, we're kind of in an era in which a lot of the people who talk about this just don't really watch the games that closely. It's just the way things are. So they clearly don't know Georgia's backup linebackers. But you can make a case those two backups are the best backups of anybody, anywhere, at any position. Now, the obvious retort to that is, well, how much do your backup linebackers really matter? And there is, having a lot of depth at certain positions does not necessarily benefit you on the field fully and completely. I would say there's an extent to which that's true. But boy, if you told me the absolute breakout star on the Georgia defense overall is a player that begins the year as a backup linebacker, it's at least a possibility. It really is. It's at least a possibility. Josh Hobbs says he's heard really good things about Cole and Williams as well. That's why there you go. That's awesome. And thanks for the kind words, Josh. I appreciate that. Randy Hall says Cole and Williams might start for any team in America, and I think that's probably true too. Pretty close to it. Tennille Calvino says if it wasn't for the Dog Nation chat, she would have already deleted her Facebook account. I'd say that, like, weirdly, I sort of like the Facebook ads. I feel like of all the online ads, I think the Facebook ads get me the best. It's honestly, it is a lot of like golf apparel and things like that, or Georgia apparel, stuff I do like Facebook, whatever like cookies thing they have or whatever they're doing to sort of track me on the internet. Honestly, they probably get me better than anybody. They really do. Certainly like YouTube, and YouTube does okay, but honestly, not always. X is just a mess when it comes to ads. Facebook ads probably get me pretty well. I think they're probably pretty good. But like if you ever go on, this is why I don't ever go on Facebook. Like 90% of what you see on Facebook is like stuff that it's just not my life. I don't know what to tell you. It's like, it's all this like, slop that I'm just not interested in. I'm just not. And listen, there are some things that could be considered slop that I am interested in. I'm not saying I'm like too sophisticated for slop. I probably like some slop. But some of the Facebook slop is just not my slop. It's just not. It's viral content for just a different person than me. And for whatever reason, Facebook serves me ads that match me pretty well. Facebook serves me like, viral clips that does not have anything to do with my life at all. Interesting how the algorithms would work that way. Ken Holcomb says recruiting is going fantastic right now. Kirby and crew are hunting and will not be the hunted. I agree with that. Tennille said your phone is listening to you and Facebook is taking notes. Yeah, we all have had that experience. I'll tell you one the other day, and I won't bore you with the details of exactly what it was. But I had this thing where all I did, and I swear to you, this is one of those things you don't know all the details. It's not going to mean anything to you. All I did was think something. We've all had the experience where it's like, is Facebook listening to me? Everybody sort of has that experience. All I did was think something. Didn't say it out loud, didn't type it, didn't do anything. Just thought it. And I started seeing things show up online that was like related to what I had thought. And I was like, that's creepy, because I know for a fact I didn't search this. Didn't type it, didn't whatever, and didn't even say it out loud, because people are always like, I think Facebook's listening. Didn't even say it out loud. I just thought it. And I started seeing stuff, at least a little bit, sort of show up in my feeds. It's like, how does that work? That's amazing. That is crazy. But there's also this thing that some of the retailers, supposedly, if you've ever read this before, they supposedly, like for women, know you're pregnant before you do, based on, I don't know, whatever, some of that kind of stuff. Bill Sanders says, BA the elitist. Hopefully not. Tennille says, I let my alter ego out on X. Yeah, I do get a little sarcastic every now and then on X, for sure. That is the case. That's funny, Tennille. Very funny. What else on Facebook? Isha Murphy checks in. By the way, Isha was on our Dog Nation cruise. Checks in to say, I got a great gift for my 50th birthday last Saturday. My wife got me tickets for the Kentucky game in Athens this year, which will be my first game attending a Georgia football game live. She also said that we'll be attending next year's Dog Nation cruise. Well, Isha, that's awesome on both accounts. First of all, so happy you're getting a chance to come in for the game against Kentucky. That's going to be amazing. Anytime you have a chance to be between the hedges, it's a special experience. And obviously, would love to see you stop by and see us at the Dog Nation post-game show that day, too. That'll be great. We plan on being back at the UGA bookstore again once again this year. Hope to see you there for that. Happy you're getting a chance to come in. We do hear from people, that get a chance to kind of come in for that first ever game, and it's always a wonderful experience. So I'm glad to hear that, and really glad you're going to be back on board for our Dog Nation cruise again next year as well. That's awesome. G. Grace, going back to the Falcons, says they had pressure to draft a Georgia guy. Don't get wrong. Walker has potential. He just didn't stand. Oh, come on, G. First part, I think you're absolutely right on. I think Atlanta got embarrassed by not just the fact that Philadelphia had drafted so many Georgia players, because honestly, so is Green Bay, so is Pittsburgh. There are a handful of teams that have kind of cornered the market on a bunch of Georgia players. Philadelphia just the most prominent. But the thing that really embarrassed Atlanta about Philadelphia is how much the Eagles celebrated it. And look, Atlanta is just sort of the classic example of kind of like they're just sort of try hard, right? It's like they're just a very try hard organization. And when Howie Roseman, who is a respected GM, when he's bragging about Georgia, well, now that sort of sets off their try hard alarms of, oh, we can't let Roseman do this. And all of a sudden now they're all about drafting a Georgia player and really telegraph the decision. So I do think there was either cultural pressure or flat out internal pressure. We got to take a Georgia player. We've never done it. Philadelphia won the Super Bowl by having done it. I'm going to make sure we do it. But I don't want, but you can miss me, to use a phrase that I probably shouldn't be using. You can miss me with the Jalen Walker criticism. You can miss me with that, because Jalen Walker is one of the best guys we've had. Gary Roach asking about our guy Cody Chaffins. And by the way, speaking of Davin Bellamy, there are rumblings and grumblings that Davin Bellamy, fresh off the UFL season coming to a close, may be set to make his triumphant return here very soon. There is back channel grumblings about that.
All right, BA.
When did you play at Chamblee, Cody?
I played first a couple years. I played the bench. I played JV. But then I played offensive line and defensive line. By my senior year, I got to start both ways.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, that's good.
I was at a school where football was not good enough, so I could do that. It was great. Like,
were you there when Roddy Jones was there?
He was an 8th grader when I was a senior.
Okay.
So we just missed him. But we had a couple guys. Our best guys went to Furman and Wofford. So that kind of tells you.
Honestly, that's not nothing.
And they made me look good too. So here's what I want to show you these videos, because we were going to try and get them in when Kaylee was on. So here's the first one.
Yeah.
This was our little Kaylee. This
there
is how
she
I imagined
is.
her driving around.
That's her going from one recruiting segment to another.
Then I said, I think she's more of a road warrior.
Oh, I like that.
How about this?
Hawk,
AI
animal,
generated, so we'll tell you that, because Milton is obviously not where Valdosta is.
Which, by the way, can we pause for a second? I don't know if you were here with us yesterday. For those who we had a big AI conversation. For those worried that AI is going to take over the universe, the fact that AI thinks that Milton, Georgia is essentially just kind of north of Ocala, I think that lets you sort of know that perhaps we don't have a ton to worry about on AI taking over the world just yet.
But this was my favorite.
I like, by the way, Kaylee kind of right there, like hawk and animal style. I do like that.
So Kaylee's here too. Kaylee, what thoughts?
I put in all this hard work this week, and this is how I get repaid.
This is awesome.
That's great. This is a celebration.
Road warrior.
This is celebrating you. This is celebrating you.
I can't take all the credit because I am the passenger princess in the car. Jeff drives everywhere,
Sure.
so I can't take credit for that. But I do like the eye black sort of a thing, though.
Yeah.
Makes me look like
See, the problem, Cody, is Kaylee doesn't know who the Road Warriors are.
Yeah.
See, so what we're coming to the realization of is she does not know who Hawk and Animal are. That's the problem.
I have hobbies, so no, I wouldn't say that.
At least if you don't know them, you know the Spike Squad. Those
Okay, yeah, I got that part.
Yeah, so the Spike Squad. Now, I'm not even sure the Spike Squad knows this either.
No,
obviously, now it's just sort of its own kind of cultural touchstone, but that's sort of also patterned after what Hawk and Animal would have made famous as the Legion of Doom, also known as the Road Warriors. Cody, I really like that a lot.
Yeah, there you go. So there's a little tidbit for
That's well done. I'm here for that. I think that's really fun. I mean, who knows how much more, we'll start seeing more of these AI-generated images on the show. But Kaylee has been doing a great job this week, and we wanted to kind of give her some celebration for all of that. Lance D says Kaylee Nation. Yeah, we're all a part of Kaylee Nation for sure. Foster Moss says, what am I going to do next week with myself since I won't be on the cruise ship? I'm going to try to lay as low as possible. I'm going to try to get off my phone, and I'm going to try to just sort of be with my family. You know what I'm saying? It's like I just sort of need that every now and then, to just like really, really unplug and really just kind of – and listen, I'd love to be on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation too. Don't get me wrong about that. But every now and then it's just kind of nice to sort of do nothing and just sort of like, be at peace and just sort of rest and sort of relax. And hopefully the brain kind of slow down a little bit. Hopefully that'll be the case. Looking forward to that for sure. So this is obviously for those like Kaylee of a younger generation. That's Paul Ellering in the middle. That is hawk and animal on both sides. And I believe I have this correct. Neither hawk nor animal are with us anymore. Do I have that right? I hope I'm not saying that incorrectly. Obviously, Laurinaitis, who was animal, his son became a linebacker at Ohio State, famously. People will remember that. But a very, very big deal in the 80s and the 90s. I would say, certainly of that era, the most popular tag team of all time, and perhaps still so. Let's see what else. I'm laughing at Brodo Baggins in here. Curtis Jackson says, I don't feel bad for the Falcons because after Georgia winning back-to-back championships, they didn't pick one dog. Yeah, I think they feel conspicuous about that. Or at least I got the sense they did. I do. I've always been of the belief that the Falcons organization, because it's the NFL, would have liked to have believed they didn't need Georgia for additional popularity. I think they like to have think of themselves as, hey, we're the NFL team in this state. We don't need to worry about what the college team is doing. But it is just obvious that Georgia football is far more popular than the Falcons. Atlanta is going to get higher TV ratings, but a lot of that is sort of based on the fact that the NFL owns TV. It just does. 1 o'clock on a Sunday for before I was alive. That is the time slot they have owned, and so therefore no one has figured out TV better than Atlanta. Better than the NFL, which obviously Atlanta benefits from. Nobody figures out TV like the NFL. But there are other ways to measure popularity more so than just television ratings, and all you really have to do is be alive and sentient to be able to recognize that in our state, college football is just more popular than professional football. It just is. Ken Holcomb says all the social media and retail companies are listening to us and watching our interest through our online actions. That is true. And, the violation of privacy seems a little, scary sometimes. I don't dispute that at all. But every now and then, you get something suggested to you. You're like, that really is kind of a good idea. In fact, I told you yesterday about you go on one of the streaming platforms to watch content. It's amazing to me how bad their algorithms are. Like the stuff that I'm seeing on the screen suggested for me to watch. In what universe do you think I would want to watch whatever this is? It's amazing how much of that there exists. Garrison Tucker says the downfall of college football goes back to Oklahoma suing for TV rights in the 80s. That was the event that started the chain reaction, how we got to where we are. That's an interesting thing to kind of go back and read on. And obviously we've seen a little bit of a splintering of TV rights since then, which some people want to kind of bring back together under one umbrella. I don't think that benefits the SEC overall. And if you want to understand the nature of the beast here, to be serious for 2 seconds, you've perhaps heard me say before that an organized minority will always beat a disorganized majority. And when you see the imposed chaos in college football and why sometimes it sort of seems like things are spiraling to anarchy, even though it would certainly appear the majority of people don't want that. This is just sort of and by the way, if you understand this, you can also understand most of the other complicated things in life too. This is why things continue to sort of get worse, even though the majority of people would prefer that not to be the case, is because the people that would like to impose the chaos in college football, they are united in that belief. And, some people, might want to take a hammer to the sport. Some people want to take a bulldozer to the sport. but they're united in their belief that they want to see destruction. And so therefore that's an organized minority coming around a simple idea. And by minority, I mean smaller number of people. An organized minority kind of unified around, we're going to try to destroy this system. The disorganized majority sort of exists around, well, should we have TV rights that are sort of unified with all conferences? Should it be split up? It's like when it comes to how do you build something, there's always going to be disagreement about how to build something. But there's only one way to tear something down. And that's why the smaller number of people can oftentimes find some organization, some unity, and that's why they move fast, even if it's against the majority's wishes. And when you sort of figure that out, a lot of things in life make sense. Garrison Tucker says, of the current coaches in college football, who does Kirby have the closest relationship with? I think a lot of these SEC coaches are a little bit like the people that you may know in your own profession where, I mean, it's been, fairly well documented. They're all texting back and forth all the time. It's kind of funny to think about too. And they've talked pretty openly about this. Obviously, some of Kirby's, as we would think, closest friends, such as like say Muschamp or, Bobo, they're not, currently head coaches out there, but you get the impression that Kirby is sort of friendly with a good number of these guys. Some of them you would absolutely expect. It seems like Kirby's also got a couple of these probably pretty close, not I want to say close necessarily, that's the wrong word, friendly with. It might be a little bit of a surprise. But it seems like these guys, are just texting back all the time. It kind of operates like any other profession where it's like, I'm sure Kirby probably feels like the only people in life that truly understand me are like the 15 other guys that sort of do what I do for a living, which is coaching here in the SEC. Bill Camacho checking out here. Thanks for the kind words, Bill. I appreciate that. I really do. Thank you very much. Cody says, not Cody Chavins, but Cody BMW MC says, what time are the recruits doing their commitments? I reckon we don't know. Jeff said something for Calicut. We say 4 p.m. or something like that for Calicut. I would say that the Malachi Lee thing you probably don't have to worry about. But it sounds like Calicut maybe 4-ish p.m. according to Jeff. And then Jeff said that Johnson tomorrow was doing his thing from like some sort of festival or something. So if we're thinking festival, we're probably thinking daytime, maybe in the daytime, something for that. SEM Dog very kindly says, we probably don't say enough how much we appreciate and enjoy having a daily outlet for our football thoughts and frustrations. You and your team do a great job every day. Enjoy your vacation. You deserve it. SEM Dog, that means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. Honestly, like talking Georgia football through the good times, the bad times, and as our lives also have their own share of good and bad times, boy, best experience I could ever have. And I'm telling you right now that, my audience, I am so thankful for it. So thankful for it. Thank you very much. Garrison Tucker says ideas on packages for our front seven this season. I always think it's interesting, like, on third down, like who gets to line up over the football. Georgia usually kind of goes with a pretty speedy package in a situation like that. How you want to employ that. If you want to go back early days of Kirby Smart, think about like, say, one of the more underrated statistical seasons from a Kirby Smart team was DeAndre Walker as that sort of situational pass rusher. Not 2018 when he had kind of the big year in kind of a lead role, but in 2017 as sort of a backup who kind of came in sort of a situational role, just sort of pin years back and go. They have that guy on this year's team. The one thing that we know is there's the potential for depth. But can they find the sort of front-end guys that can be the sort of game-changer players? I got my on Gabe Harris as a big role for this team. I think that Harris could be really important. I think that could be a really big deal. Obviously, Christian Miller's the guy we kind of think of, I would say, most prominently as most likely All-SEC, most likely first-round pick. I'd probably put that on Miller. And then we're able to see what they kind of build around him. Ken Holcomb, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. All right, let's take some final comments, and then we're going to get ready to go. Paul Moon says that DawgNation Daily saved me during the lockdown. I'd been watching, but having this community kept me sane during that insane time. Yeah, Paul, I think about 2020 a lot. First of all, it's awesome to hear you say that. And it was just a really just a bad time. Honestly, it's a bad time. And I mean, I'd love to just tell you exactly why. I mean, it's just one of those things of I could not believe how casual some people were being about maybe we'll have a season and maybe we don't, or maybe we'll just play it in the spring, or maybe whatever. It just would have been calamitous. It just would have been calamitous not to have a season that year. And, I did sort of get the sense of, I had so much frustration in my life during that time because of how things were playing out. So much frustration. But when we came on here, and by the way, it's amazing. I mean, it's the same decade we're in now, which is amazing. But like technology-wise, it's just a different universe compared to what it is now. Like, it's funny. We would do the podcast separate from the video. Like I would do the video stream and we'd kind of talk like I am now. Then that was over. I'd go down in my basement at my house at the time and then record the podcast kind of like an old school way like we used to do. The podcast and the video were like two separate things because a lot of that streaming technology, for us in 2020 was still a little bit new. It's just crazy. Even like a half a decade, the technology is totally different. We ain't never doing that again as far as I'm concerned. But if somehow that was thrust upon us, which over my dead body, but if that was thrust upon us, technology-wise, we could just do it now. I mean, like, there's really very little difference. We just have much better, like, remote streaming technology than we used to have. Crazy that it was it was really different back then. Really different back then. Foster says 2020 showed you not to take anything for granted. And I will tell you, Foster, there's plenty I get wrong. This is one thing I have not gotten wrong. I don't think, at least most days. You're 100% right when you say that year showed you not to take anything for granted. And I really have tried very hard not to take anything for granted since then. I really have. There are some days when I fail. I won't pretend that I don't. But broadly speaking, that is an idea that I think is in my spirit now. It's just in my core that, this football season, this job, this health. I mean, you get to be, of a certain age and all of a sudden you don't take health for granted anymore. That every day you have it is one to be thankful for. And nothing can be given about tomorrow. Things have a way of changing very, very fast sometimes. And so we certainly keep that in mind. Jonathan Aaron says R.I.P. to Rick Hurst. That's the former Boston Red Sox pitcher. Is that right? That's who Rick Hurst, number 2 arm for them in 86 when they won the American League. Clemens. See what that rotation would have been: Clemens, Hurst, Oil Can Boyd, Calvin Sherald. Was Sheraldi a starter on that team too? But yeah, Hurst, a really good pitcher in the American League in my childhood. Very sad. All right, last ones, and then we're gone for the week. Tino Calvino says, DawgNation Daily kept me through my years of grief, followed by years of COVID. She said I was living in California at the time. I'm so grateful to be back in Georgia. Boiled peanuts and hearing Go Dogs randomly is a blessing. It's Neil, I think that's really well said. We're glad to have you back here in our state, too. That's awesome. Philip Jordan Wells says the Friday freestyle cool down. Yeah. One thing I like about the cool down recently is, in like the last year or so, and I do, listen, we take it very serious. We're a Georgia football show, and when you listen to the show, we are not off topic very much. We're really not. Like, I'm not one of these podcasters that comes on here and like, boy, you won't believe about this crazy thing that happened in my life. Now, maybe I should do more of my own personal stories. Maybe I should. For the most part, we talk about Georgia football. We're very, very intent on delivering the content that people expect. I do like a looser version of the cool down. I don't know if the audience likes it or not. I will say that years ago, we used to get some complaints if we weren't talking, strictly Georgia football in the cool down. It seems like we get a little less of that than we used to. I don't know if we've run people off. I hope not. But maybe we have. I do like a looser cool down. I do. I don't want to do loosey-goosey show because, honestly, we've, kind of built our business around speaking about the thing that people expect us to talk about. But I do like a looser cool down. Still, we're not gonna go out of bounds and speak about nonsense that the rest of the internet's dominated by. But I do like a looser cool down, and I would say that I'm sensing a greater permission structure for some of that, which I like. I can't quite tell if the audience overall likes it, but I do like it. Earl Smith, good to have you here. Appreciate that. Anything else? Philip Jordan Wells on the subject of the cool down too. Yeah, listen, if you need that air conditioning tuned back up, R.S. Andrews got you on that. Brodo Baggins says it's called a cool down for a reason. I'm here for it. Yeah, that's kind of the thought, right? It's like you get all worked up talking Georgia football, but honestly, most people have other stuff also going on in their lives there too on that. Wait, did I have the wrong thing? Somebody said that Rick Hurst is the Dukes of that's okay. Pardon me. The Red Sox pitcher was Bruce Hurst. Who is Rick Hurst? Who did he play on the Dukes of Hazzard? Who is? Let me see. I mean, I know the Dukes of Hazzard pretty well. Oh, that wasn't Cletus. What was his name? One of the sheriff deputies. So, as far as I know, Bruce Hurst is still alive. Let me just say a very, very quick apology to the Hurst family on that. Okay, so this was Cletus on the Dukes of Hazzard. There were two different deputies. There was Enos, who I probably think of when I think of the Dukes of Hazzard, I guess I think of Enos as the deputy. But Cletus was also one of those, and a really good actor on the show. I did not know his name was Rick Hurst, and I do apologize for that. And I am very sorry to the family of Bruce Hurst for confusing him. But yeah, but I was a huge Dukes of Hazzard fan, huge. So he was 79 years old, so very sad, very sad. Did love the Dukes of Hazzard, and I do remember Cletus, although I do probably think of Enos more. I guess I sort of associate Enos as Sheriff Roscoe's deputy the most. Let us see. Foster Moss says AIBA spreading wrong info. Yeah, I told you yesterday, like some of the problem with AI is it's like getting bad info and now it's like circulating it right back in there. That is indeed the case. So here we are, bragging on myself a minute ago for having a good show, and then on the way out the door we gave you some fake news, which I did not mean to do. Yeah, Jack Fullerton also pointing out Bruce Hurst is the Red Sox pitcher, and as far as I know, is still happy and healthy. So let me very much correct myself there on that. But I am very sad about Rick Hurst, Cletus and the Dukes of Hazzard, because I love that show. Of course, James Best, the actor that played Sheriff Roscoe, and Rick Hurst was Cletus, one of his deputies during the show. Storyline-wise, was Cletus or Enos the one that was like Boss Hogg's nephew or something? Who was the one that was related to Boss Hogg? Was that Cletus or was that Enos? Paul Moon is very young, much younger than me. He's laughing about the names Enos and Cletus. Listen, you got to go find Dukes of Hazzard. There's plenty to laugh about as far as that show is concerned, for sure. All right, we got to get ready to go. Good stuff, everybody. Thanks for your conversation here. Appreciate all of that. And hope you have a great week. So we'll have shows Monday, Tuesday. No live commentary, but the shows themselves are going to be good. Wednesday, a little bit of me, then Before the Hedges. Thursday, a little bit of me. Then we'll have DawgNation at Large. No show at all on Friday, which is our tradition. There's like 4 days out of the year. Memorial Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas. We just sort of have no show. 2 in the traditional holiday season, 2 in the summer. That's sort of our, traditional cadence on all that. Most of the holidays sort of take place during the year. But we'll do that. And then I'll be back the following Monday, and we'll roll all the way through that 2025 season. That's really, really exciting. Enjoy it. Have a great weekend. Check out RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price promise you can trust. them on that, including, as it's very hot, getting your air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. You can trust them on that. They'll take good care of you. In fact, the RS stands for rapid service. Have a great weekend. Back next week, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then.